So the Lubavitcher Rebbe is stressing that the fact that Gorbachev and Reagan met, I think this was 1991, that they met, 1991, I think 1992, that they met and they decided that there's going to be world peace, and all the nations in the world agreed, and there was going to be a cessation of making weapons of war and nuclear armament and etc. And this actually, it happened for a while. It happened. So the Rebbe said this is an amazing thing. It's never happened before in the history of the world, that all the nations in the world all got together and decided in a way of peace, peaceful way, that there's going to be an organization to talk about peace and to make this, right? And they're going to, all of them are going to stop making war. And there was true, there was the United Nations, but nobody made any agreements like this, that there was going to be world peace, and everybody suspected Russia and communism of taking the world. And really, there was quite a danger from communism. Communism was a very big danger to the world. Danger. Communism, very interesting. I mean, if you think about it, it's a tremendously interesting thing, communism. Tremendously interesting. Because it never worked. Never worked. It just caused death and destruction everywhere. And millions, tens of millions of people were killed in the most cruel ways because of communism and the spread of communism. It never worked. But on the other hand, it was always believed by some of the most intelligent people. The most intelligent people, right? They believed it. And perhaps because they were intelligent and removed from reality, so they believed that their ideas would prevail and that eventually there would be world equality. And this, of course, it never succeeded. Incidentally, I was thinking about it. I think that one of the main reasons that communism cannot succeed is because it doesn't have a place for charity. No one has more than anybody else. So there's no giving charity to other people. There's no, anyway, I don't know. That's what I thought. And because the fact of the matter is it never works. And it was totally evil and totally, oppressive, worst, terrible oppression there could possibly be, because they thought we have the answer to the world's problems. Anyone against us is obviously against the world's, world peace, and world communism is the answer. Anyone against us is the enemy of mankind. Whatever the logic was, it never worked. And suddenly, all of a sudden, it ended. It ended, right? The Russia was the big threat, and Russia was this. Suddenly, Gorbachev said, that's it. We're not being a threat anymore. We're not threatening anybody. We're going to make peace. We're going to make peace with America. We want to have peace. And it worked. It worked. People enjoyed it. People liked the idea. There was actually a degree of trust against it for a while. It worked. So the Rebbe said, just the fact, even if it worked for one day, it doesn't make any difference. The fact that it was actually brought into the world, such a thing, is a sign of the Moshiach. Says the Rebbe even more. Where did this happen? It happened in New York, the place where the previous Rebbe, who he was the Moshiach of the generation, that it occurred there, right? And the Rebbe, of course, was referring to himself as well. And it also happened in the month of Shvat, which is the month of Shvat is the month when the previous Rebbe passed away and when our Rebbe took over. So we're going to get to also talking about Mishpatim. We'll talk about that. The time that occurred, the Torah portion. Also, it says this whole idea of the leaders of the world, that they're all going to beat their swords into plowshares. This is right before Mishpatim. This is in this week's Torah portion is Mishpatim. Okay, what is Mishpatim? Mishpatim is intellect. Mishpatim are logical laws. Kitatu charboteim deitim. This whole idea, what Isaiah said, that the world, they will beat their swords into plows. This is understood in human intellect. And that's the idea of Mishpatim. That's what this Torah portion is talking about. It's not talking about such miraculous things or commandments which are, completely removed from understanding. This is mostly our day-to-day practical commandments. Mishpatim. In Judaism, there's three types of commandments. There are commandments which make absolutely no sense whatsoever, like don't eat milk or meat together, or a lot of the details of the commandments. The tefillin have to be written exactly this way, and they've got to be black, and they have to be bad. There's no logic behind it whatsoever. It doesn't add anything to me at all. I just bought a pair of tefillin for $2,000, and one letter happens to be cracked or missing. The whole thing is no good. What sense does that make? Those are called chukim. Makes no sense. Then there's religious laws. There are religious laws like holidays, and that's called edut. Essentially, they don't make any sense, but once they're instituted, so they do sort of make sense. But then there's laws called mishpatim. Mishpatim are logical laws. Logical laws, these are logical. That's this week's Torah portion, mishpatim. These are laws that even human logic will obligate them because it assures, how do you say, peace and order, law and order and peace in your society. And also they negate, right? You shouldn't kill people, you shouldn't steal people, shouldn't make war. This just makes destruction, God forbid. And all of a sudden they decide, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Okay, this is week's Torah portion is mishpatim. Mishpatim are logical laws. Okay, by means of meeting together with America and Russia, met together, and they negated, they tried to cancel war that brings only destruction and destruction and decimation. Until they agreed even more that they're going to stop producing weapons of war. That's what it means. They will beat their swords into plowshares. They will become instruments to improve mankind. Nevertheless, in the course of all the generations, there were tremendous numbers of wars between the nations. The Guru Harris Chorban Olam says logically it should be that nations should get together and make peace. But the fact of the matter is it hasn't been that way. Up to now, the world has been decided by war. By war. This is totally the opposite of human intelligence, especially communism. Communism says that one of the basic principles of communism is revolution. Revolution, that the working class has to stand up and revolt, even violently with murder. And they did it. They did it. All these kinds of the Russian Revolution. I think there was like 2 million people, something like that, killed in the Russian Revolution. But nevertheless, the real reason should the Kufa Acharona, that in our last generation, so the Rebbe says, first time in the history of the world that all of the world got together and they all decided that there's not going to be any more wars, and there's not going to be any more conquering, and there's not going to be any more destruction. Like the Rebbe said, even if this decision only lasted for a day, but still the decision was made. It opened up the door to a new thing. It says the real reason that this happened can be seen because it's a desire to make a new era, an era of peace. There won't be any more wars in the world. It'll begin the new time in the world that there'll be tzedek, justice, and honesty, peace and unity. Like it's stressed in the decisions of the nations, Erev Shabbat, says the Rebbe, right before the Shabbat, and it was not only because of the human intelligence dictated so, because we saw that human logic, this was all the generations, and all the generations, they used their logic to make wars, right? So the reason all of a sudden now that they decided to make peace is not because they decided enough war, enough destruction. This has been all the time. People have always wanted to live in peace. Why all of a sudden now? It says because now is a different time according to the Torah. It says in the Torah, "V'kitatu charboteim leitim." It says from Mount Sinai, the prophet Isaiah, right, says that we must now stop war. There's going to come a time of Mashiach that there's not going to be any more war. Says the Rebbe, this is the footnote, says this is also the that the fact is that this announcement that they made is made in a place where there's a building. One of the buildings in the United Nations is written on that building. It's carved out, and they will beat their sword into plowshare. That was the original idea behind the United Nations. I mean, it never really worked, but the Kitatu Charbotein Litim, Shebezem Mudash is stressed that this decision that they made is not based on human intelligence. It's not based on the human desire for peace. It's based because there's a sentence in the Torah, and the Torah came from Mount Sinai. And because it says that in the Torah that there's going to be such a time, is the manifestation of that happening is because of the Torah. It's not because of people logic, because people always had logic. So according to this, Yesh Lomar, we can say that this decision and this announcement of all of the leaders of the world, Erev Shabbat, this just happened right before the Rebbe was speaking. Parshat Mishpatim, Al Derech Mamad Umatzav, the Kitatu Charboteim Leitim, of plowing of pounding their swords into plows, is a Totza'am Yachlata V'Achraza Malchi Rabbanan. This is a result of the rabbis. And what did the rabbis decide? They decided, Hine Zeh Mashiach Bo. There was a Psak Din of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he said, Kavar Nishalmu Maseyam Vavadatayam, that we have finished everything necessary to finish off the exile. We've suffered enough. There's been enough prayers. There's been enough service. There's enough faith, enough suffering. The previous Rebbe said, Muchanim, this is after World War II, we are prepared to receive the face of the Mashiach. The Cain, the Pesach Din, the Rabbanan, also the rabbis here in Israel, She'egia Zman Agula. They made what's the word for it? A petition. They all signed, the rabbis in Israel, they all signed a big petition, and they said that according to all the signs, the Chabad rabbis especially, but they got other rabbis also, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he is has all the qualifications of Mashiach, and that the time for redemption has come, and they all signed this. They all signed it. There was like 100, 500. There were some people who continued getting, they have like 500 signatures on it. And the Rebbe said, because of that, that's why, the real reason why all of a sudden now these ideas for world peace are coming out. Yamod Melech Bebeit David, will stand up a king from the house of King David, and the chazakah that he's the Mashiach. Until it will be Arizeh Mashiach Bavadai, he will certainly be Mashiach. This comes from Mount Sinai. This is a decision not by humans, but by God. Shenimshach, that it came down into the world, ad kedekach, to the degree, Shemani almost olam, that even the leaders of the non-Jews, the non-Jewish country, Gentile countries, they decided and they announced from their own free will, from their own decision, and in their own courts, sheyesh bem tokef, that they have legal power, the din of the malchus adina, like it says, the mind of matzah kitru charbotein le'itim. So if so, the Rebbe is announcing this 33 years ago, that's it. The thing, it's all finished, and then now is the time for peace. Now is the time. Okay, what happened in the middle? Is as many Jews as you find, especially Chabad people, you'll find all sorts of different explanations. I have my interpretation. Other people have their interpretation. Whatever their interpretations are, it's wonderful. It's great. But the fact of the matter is, here we have it from the source. The Rebbe himself said that's it. As soon as they decided there's going to be peace in the world, then that brought peace into the world, because it's not their decision, it's God's decision. And that it's taking time to manifest, okay, go figure it out. But that's what it is. That's what the answer is. That's the reason. It's just like when they changed from horse and buggies to combustion engines. So there were problems with the combustion engines. There are problems, but nevertheless, here it is. That's it. The old time is finished. The horse and buggy era is over. Now we have a whole new means of transportation, combustion engines, right? Combustion. I likened it to something else. My comparison is like this: a person that got into a terrible auto accident, and it broke every bone in his body, every limb, every organ was pierced and broken, but the guy's still alive. And the doctors go to work. They go to work. They bring the biggest expert brain surgeon, biggest heart surgeon, liver surgeon, bone surgeon. They bring them all and they work on this fellow and they work on him. And they work on him for 2,000 years. They work on him. And finally, the family comes and they all gather around. And the doctor says, "You have something to tell us, doctor?" He says, "Yes, I do." "Okay, break it to us, doctor." "The operations were successful. He's going to live. It's okay. He's going to, really, wow, that's amazing. He's going to live." But he was broken. Everybody said there was no chance. That's what they said. But I brought the biggest experts and there were big miracles. And he said, "Can we see him?" He says, "Yes, but behind this wall, because behind this window, and don't go in. You can't see him." So they look inside and they see, here's, grandpa, whatever. And he's got all these tubes and monitors and beep, beep all around. And he's being, how do you say, artificially, their inspiration, respiration. And they look, they say, "That's terrible." The doctor says, "Shh, don't yell. The noise can come through." He says, "But that's healthy." Listen, doctor says, "Listen, I know what I'm talking about. The operation was a success. It'll take a little while for him to totally, listen, he's 2,000 years, he's been all broken up. So it's going to take a little while for him to, but not a long time. Not a long time. Have faith in me. I'm telling you, it's okay." It's the same thing. The Jewish people have been sick in exile for 2,000 years, and the Rebbes have been working on him. And now the Rebbe announced, it's okay, he's healed. So we look at the world and say, "What? This is healed? This is terrible." Shh, I'm telling you, it's healed. Everything is okay. It'll take a little while for him to recover. Little by little, we'll take off this monitor, this infusion, this respiration, this thing. But I'm telling you, everything is okay. Everything is okay. We have to just get him back to his feet gradually. That's how I liken the situation. That's how I liken what the situation is now. That it's terrible. It's terrible. We have terrible leaders. We have terrible this. Don't worry. Little by little, it's gonna be okay. The Yeshlom, we can say, as soon as the Rebbe announced that the world is okay, it's the operation is successful. We can say the Hadgasha v'sheichus shel achlatas, that its connection of this announcement is to Mount Sinai, is especially revealed on Shabbat. That's what Rebbe was speaking on this Shabbat, right? It was 1992. Shabo nasit aliyah, the call aliyah in Shabbat. That Shabbat gives new meaning and new elevation to everything that's before, including everything that happened in the previous week, including what happened in the United Nations, including this announcement of peace. Shahakta. So now on Shabbat, this is even elevated more. It's elevated to the holiness of Shabbat. Like it says, Yochel b'Shabbat, a person who prepares the 6 days of the week, he will prepare his food before Shabbat, he will eat on Shabbos. He will have a Shabbos meal. But often, the Torah of Milofanov says that Shabbat, it says it takes from the previous days, it takes from the days that are afterwards, elevates them all. But then this week's Shabbat portion, we read in the Shabbat, Mishpatim. We read Mishpatim in a congregation, and with a blessing before and afterwards, that in this Torah portion of this week, and that's what the Rebbe read then. It said, Shabbat Mudgash, it's said that the Mishpatim, that the logical laws, the laws of damages, the laws of propriety, the laws of ownership, of loans, etc., logical laws which are found in every society in the world, but by the Jews, it's not logical. It's from Sinai. It's from Mount Sinai. It's miracles. It seems to be regular laws. Says that's what you're right. That's what it seems to be, but it's not. Similarly, also what we're talking about here, the fact that the leaders of the world, they announced that we are pounding our swords into plows, and they did it because human intelligence dictates so that's a good thing, like Mishpatim, like this week's Torah portion, that also the non-Jews also have courts of justice, says the Rebbe, but don't think that that's the real reason. The real reason is it's because of the Torah. The Torah says that Mashiach is going to come and there's going to be peace in the world, and this is the beginning of it. We can also add on the connection of Mishpatim to the end of the time of exile and the beginning of the redemption, which the Rebbe says that's where we are now. The Hemshech HaParsha, continuing in our Torah portion. What does it say? Sheparsha Mishpatim, and Parshas Mishpatim comes after last week's Torah portion, which was giving the Torah. That there it's the finishing of the, and what does it say? I'm sorry, in this week's Torah portion, it's I'm sorry, last week's Torah portion, how does it end here? Let's see it. Let's have it here. It says like this, right at the end of last week's Torah portion. It talks about the altar. In Mizbach Aramata Sali, Lota Sebem Gazis here. In Mizbach Aramata Sali, Losis Neazem Gazist. Ki Harchar Bacha Alecha. When you make the tabernacle, where you have the sentence over here. Oh, here it is. Here, see, no, it's here. Yes. Here, yeah. I had it right. Here, see. If, let me get this straight because the thing is backwards. Yes. If an altar of stone you make for me, you shouldn't carve it. Okay, that's the law about the. This is the end of last week's Torah portion. This is the end. See, here's the end. Don't make a stairs going up to my altar. It should be a ramp going up. That's the end of last week's Torah portion, right? Here we go. It says the end of last week's Torah portion talks about the altar. It talks about the laws of the altar. And right after that, it comes these laws of monetary laws. And the question is asked in the Talmud, why is this week's Torah portion, which talks about logical laws, written right after the laws of the altar? You should know you should put Sanhedrin, the high court, the court of 71 men, near the altar, in the holy temple. Amizbeach, near the altar. Shebezeh Merumas, this hints at another one of the prophecies that's going to be in the days of the Mashiach, Ashiva Shoftayach Karishona. I will bring back your judges like in the beginning. Shivat Sanhedrin, returning Sanhedrin, the Lishkat Gazit, to one of these places in the holy temple, Beit HaMikdash, in the third temple. Alter says similarly in the continuation of this week's Torah portion, Lahaviyacha, to bring to the place that I prepared. Kavar Makomi Nikar, the place of godliness is already there. This is one of the sentences that lets you know that there is a holy temple from above, and it is corresponding to the holy temple from below. That God has a holy temple, so to speak. In other words, don't think that the holy temple that's in this world is just a building for Judaism. No, it's God's building, that God built it. And what is one of the main features in the holy temple is the Sanhedrin was there. All these monetary laws, mundane laws, and nothing to do with God, nothing to do with religion. Right? Somebody's ox gores my ox. That's godly, but that's got nothing to take it to court. What it is that's right. The court is holy. The court is in the holy temple. These laws are not human laws, but they're God's laws, but in human intelligence. God wants us to understand that Torah was given to us. If so, the same thing is with these great leaders of the world that they decided on peace. These are logical things. What's it got to do with holiness? What's it got to do with? It says that's why these logical laws are mentioned in the Torah, this week's Torah portion, and it's the same Torah portion that all these leaders of the world decided on peace. Because even though the Jewish laws seem to be logical, just like the decision of these world leaders seem to be logical, but the fact is not, it's in the Holy Temple. Other thing, the Parshat Mishpatim, from Parshat Mishpatim next week is Parshat Truma. What's in Parshat Truma? Where we begin this mincha that talks about the commandment of making a tabernacle, holy temple. God said, make me a holy temple and I will dwell among you. Shekaya al-asiyat the Mishkan, to make the what's called the tabernacle. Next week we'll talk about that more. The tabernacle was called the holy place, Mikdash. It was called the holy, and this was the forerunner of the first temple and the second temple, and all mainly of the third temple that Moshiach is going to build. That's next week. And so in between last week's Torah portion, Yitro, which ends up talking about the altar in the temple, and next week's Torah portion, which is talking about building the tabernacle, in the middle is this week's Torah portion, Mishpatim. Mishpatim are logical laws. What are they doing between these two things? The tabernacle we'll read about next week and the altar that we read about last week, in order to stress that the whole idea of the redemption, the third temple, and the altar, and the Sanhedrin, the high court, which are in these Torah portions, Yitro and Truma, they are in a way of mishpatim. Namely what? That don't think it's only in God's God's realm, and we shouldn't even try to understand it. No. That we have to use our human intelligence to understand that these things are good as much as we can. Namely, these laws are God's laws, they're not our laws. And also the same thing with Gorbachev and Reagan, that the reason that they said these things is because God wanted them to. It's already drawn down into the world. And the world on its own is announcing that the time of redemption has arrived. Okay, just one more paragraph, we'll see. Va'od ve'ikar, and the main thing is, what was this? Va'od ve'ikar, the main thing is that also the Torah portion is talking about the connection of the end of exile and the beginning of the redemption. Why? Like it's explained in many places in the Talmud, that the details of the laws in this week's Torah portion are talking about matters which are interpersonal, one person and another, and a lot of them are damages. According to one opinion, that there's three tractates: Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Batra. Baba means the first door, the second door. Each one are talking about different types of damages. Different types of damages. One person wants to steal land from the other one. One person wants to steal a house from somebody else. One person wants to steal somebody else's property, whatever it is. It says all of them really. These are called, and it's all mentioned in this week's Torah portion. It all draws from here. It says really there's one big tractate. It's called Tractate of Damages, and it's divided up into three. It begins with Baba Kama, the first door, which is talking about damages like an ox and a pit and a flame, or fire, or whatever it is, and the people who damage one another. And a judge has not got how judges should judge. They can't. And judges have to remove the damages first of all from people, and then they can start to judge, because first of all, that's the Baba Kama. Baba Kama, that first of all is talking about damages. Oxes damages one another, people damage. Afterwards, it's called the middle gate. That's the second Talmud. This is talking about mostly about renting and borrowing and monetary things, not so much about damages. One person lies, one person wants to steal. Yes. And these also are talked about in this week's Torah portion. It talks about an ox and a pit and things like that. The damage. Right. And then afterwards is Baba Batra. It's called the last gate. And there it's talking about land. Land cases mostly deer, houses, and etc. It's stressed in the Zohar that these three Babi Dini Tiknu, that these three, it's stressed, in the words of the Zohar, that there are three types of laws in the Mishnah. One is the beginning. It's talking about the four fathers of damages, an ox, etc. The middle is talking about property, garments and things like that. Three partners, etc. And it's things that are lost. And then afterwards, that talks about the last one is talking about that's Baba Metzia, and then finally it talks about Baba Tlita the third, which is the land property. All these are different talks about in one sentence. Al Dal Davar Pesha Al Shur Al Por in this week's Torah portion. So that's the whole idea. These three damages. That's talking about now the time of exile. Damages that's what's spoken about in this week's Torah portion. This is talking about the time of exile. And that's what we're reading about now, putting an end to exile. And we'll discuss this, God willing, more tomorrow. Okay, so what did we learn today? Mainly, we learned that God, and especially the Torah, is the boss of the world. And one of the things the Torah says is that Mashiach is going to come and make world peace. And so therefore, that which Gorbachev and Reagan, they decided is going to be world peace. This is not just because human intelligence. This is because that God decided to do so. And it's the same thing with all the laws of the Torah. It's not just because human intelligence dictates so, but because God decided to do so. And when that's the whole idea of the future redemption, that people will realize that the same God that's creating us is the same God that gives the Torah and the same God that creates the world, and that all of these things are tremendously precious to God. People, property, the Torah, humanity, it's all there in order to express the oneness of God in the world, a whole new reality that's hidden inside of this physical world that we're not aware of yet. And we will be aware. That's what the point is that this peace that's being made is not just another step in human achievement. It's a revelation of the creator of all achievements, the creator of all good and life and love. It's being revealed now in the world through these things, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Now let's do the Yom Yom.